Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Taped podcast, the most LSD-fueled podcast in the world. We are your hosts, myself, Mickey T.
And me, Nostalgia. I remember it, so you don't have to.
Exactly. And we are here today with a special guest on the channel. He's a fellow reviewer on both YouTube and Album of the Year. We'd like to welcome Trey from TreyLikesBands. Trey, welcome to the Tape podcast.
Woo! Hi guys, I like bands and I like the Beatles because they're a band.
Hell yeah.
That is great. And speaking of the Beatles, that's what we're doing today. We are going to be ranking every single core studio album from legendary 60s rock band, the Beatles. Who doesn't know the Beatles at this point?
They're like so transcendental to every music genre.
They pretty much are at this stage. So, yeah, I think without further ado, I think we should just get into it. We've got 13 albums, and yeah. So, number 13 pick, I chose Yellow Submarine.
For number 13, I also chose Yellow Submarine.
Yeah, I did as well.
I mean, at this stage, Yellow Submarine is just such an obvious choice to pick for, like, the worst album from the Beatles. Like, it's a soundtrack album that has so little to do with the actual Beatles that it shouldn't really count as, like, a core album. You know, the first album...
I totally get that.
Yeah, like, the first half of the album, you know, it contains some, you know, familiar Beatles tracks that we've heard before. And, you know, the second half is an instrumental score that was composed by George Martin. And it's not bad or anything like that. It's just not really as interesting or as engaging, you know? And, you know, the first half is actually pretty good. I do enjoy the first half quite a lot, but the second half with the instrumentals and the orchestral sequences, I don't really find them all that interesting. And there's not really much else to say about Yellow Submarine in that sense.
Yeah, I think it's got two great new tracks, Only a Northern Song and Hey Bulldog. Then everything else is just either re-released songs or just orchestral vomit. I don't care much for this album at all. I think that the two songs I did mention are great, but other than that, it's totally insignificant in my eyes.
Yeah, I think you guys pretty much said it all. Not many notable things on the second half. Well, it's not necessarily bad. It's just, like, there, and it exists for the movie and the movie alone. I love Hey Bulldog, and I love It's All Too Much. Those are my favorites.
Speaking of favorites, my favorite tracks from Yellow Submarine were the title track and All You Need Is Love. And my least favorite track is Yellow Submarine and Pepperland.
My favorites were Yellow Submarine, Only a Northern Song, Hey Bulldog. My least favorite was All Together Now.
Yeah, my favorites were Hey Bulldog and It's All Too Much. My least favorite was probably, I don't know, something like March of the Meanies. Something like that.
What a title.
Really.
It's like a Disney villain army or some shit. Like straight to DVD
I do think
sequel.
the movie's really good. I love the movie.
I haven't seen the movie.
I haven't seen it either, I will say that much.
That's a recommendation from me.
I will take that recommendation into consideration.
I will, yeah.
Sweet.
Alright, moving on to our number 12 pick. And I chose A Hard Day's Night.
I chose Please Please Me.
I chose A Hard Day's Night.
Hey,
you can start first then. Since
Okay. Alright, Hard Day's Night is probably my least favourite of the early era of the Beatles. While I do think there are moments of decent songwriting and moments that I think are actually pretty solid, I just don't really find it as interesting as any of the other Beatles albums put above this. Like, a lot of the songs on here aren't really all that interesting to me. They just kind of blend together. It doesn't really add much to the, you know, early Beatles formula, apart from some of the decent songwriting. Plus, there isn't really a lot of great or outstanding highs that I would normally expect in a Beatles album. Like, there's only maybe a small margin of tracks that I would actually consider to be noteworthy from this album, and it's my least favorite because of that.
Solid. I think A Hard Day's Night, it's not I don't think they have any bad albums, but coming from their early era, it's definitely their weakest in my opinion. There's not much in the theme holding the tracks together, but there's also a movie that goes along with it, which also is kind of crazy as well. So it's kind of like they just made a ton of kind of like B tier, C tier songs, put them on an album and said, hey, this is the soundtrack for the movie and also a studio album we have.
I mean, I've seen clips of the movie. The movie actually seems pretty funny.
Yeah, it's very funny.
No, actually, we're just good friends.
Well, I went with Please Please Me, their debut. And, you know, at this point, obviously they were only really scratching the surface of their potential. They weren't, you know, the Beatles we all know, the Beatles we all love. They were just four lads from Liverpool making very, like, inoffensive, commercially appealing rock and roll tunes for young people to dance to, as opposed to what most people really remember them for. I think it's not a bad album, as Trey said. I don't think they have any bad albums. It's just when I'm pitting against some of the later releases, it doesn't really stand out in any way to me. There are some good tracks, but just for every good track, there's a track that's just not very memorable. 6 of the 14 tracks are covers, which I have nothing against covers at all, but I just think that the original Beatles songs have this kind of charisma and energy to them that the covers never really capture, and at times they just sound a bit awkward to me. And other than that, the original stuff on this is pretty good. The songwriting is mostly serviceable. I don't think it's as good as it would be on later records, but it's pretty serviceable. It is a bit hit or miss with, you know, lines like the infamous "she was only 17, you know what I mean." I don't quite know what he means, but
no.
Yeah, other than that, it's a serviceable album. That's all I have to say.
Fair enough, I suppose. My favourite tracks from A Hard Day's Night were If I Fell and Can't Buy Me Love. My least favourite track is Anytime at All.
My favorites from A Hard Day's Night, I gotta go with And I Love Her, If I Fell, Hard Day's Night, Can't Buy Me Love. Least favorite, probably around, like, You Can't Do That, or I'll Be Back.
My favorites on Please Please Me were Despite the Lyric, I Saw Her Standing There, Please Please Me, and Twist and Shout. My least favorite, probably Do You Want to Know a Secret?
Yes, I would like to know a secret.
No, I don't want to know a secret.
Especially after that previous line.
Oh, Christ, yeah, true. Okay, that line aside, moving on to our number 11 picks, I chose Please Please Me.
I chose Beatles for Sale.
I chose With the Beatles.
Ooh,
I like the diversity of this one.
variety.
Yeah.
Alright, Please Please Me. You know, it's the Beatles' debut album. It's a decent enough debut, in my opinion. It's a serviceable commercial album that, you know, that has, like, love songs that, you know, young people were made to dance to. But it did showcase that the Beatles had a knack for making really fun, like, upbeat, catchy pop rock tunes to dance to. You know, a lot of the tracks on here I don't really care for. The track list is pretty forgettable in some aspects. But I do think there are some genuinely fun tracks here. You know, instrumental-wise, you know, it's pretty standard 60s pop rock. You know, songwriting-wise, you know, it's nothing special. And, you know, vocal-wise, I think it has some really great moments. Honestly, I think vocal performances are what carry this album for me a lot of the time. A lot of the energy from it. And other than that, I think, you know, it's just a pretty serviceable commercial album.
Trey, you can go next.
All right. Well, I chose With the Beatles, and I just like to think of With the Beatles as Please Please Me Too. I mean, it's basically their sophomore album. They're just getting off the hype of the previous, and there's not much to it that sets it apart. It's just in my ranking that there's just weaker tracks altogether. Nothing holds them together. They're still fun, but it's nothing motivating, in my opinion.
I think the Beatles for Sale starts off quite strong, but as it goes on, it doesn't really lead to anything bigger in my eyes. Again, it has a lot of covers, which I don't think is a bad thing in of itself, but I do prefer the Beatles when they're performing their own original songs. That being said, not all the covers are bad. I think most of them are good. Rock and Roll Music, that cover is amazing. I forgot to mention John's vocals on the early albums were incredible, even more so than on the later albums. I do have to point that out. Yeah,
I agree too. I
feel like overall,
wasn't it popular around the time to do covers like of popular songs?
Yeah, it was. I do prefer the original work. It has that wacky flair to it.
Yeah, I agree. I think the original work is miles better.
Yeah, that being said, I think it's, once again, a very serviceable album. I think it's just betrayed by its own inconsistency and what almost seems like a bit of a lack of direction to me.
Fair enough, I suppose. Alright, my favourite tracks from... Wait, did I say Please Please Me?
Did you? You're supposed to be keeping track of that. Yeah, I think you did.
But professional podcast.
Yes.
Alright. My favourite tracks from Please Please Me were I Saw Her Standing There, despite the lyric, Misery, Chains, Boys and Twist and Shout. Worst is Anna, Go to Him.
My favorites from With the Beatles are It Won't Be Long, All My Loving, Till There Was You, Please Mr. Postman, that's a cover, I think. Yeah, that's a cover. So is Roll Over Beethoven. I Want to Be Your Man's okay. And then my least favorite tracks are probably Little Child and Don't Bother Me.
My favorite
Little Child, Don't Bother Me.
That's how it goes in the track list, so maybe it's like some sort of subliminal message.
It's cohesive. There's a concept.
She was only 17, you know what I mean? Little Child, Don't Bother Me.
Bars.
That is straight bars. Can I get you to feature?
Bruh, you have to pay me a hefty sum.
The Beatles featuring
KSI.
nostalgia.
Oh.
I'll do a KSI. I won't pay you at all.
Oh, yeah. I heard that. You told me, didn't you?
Yeah, I told you.
Oh, yeah. Beatles for Sale. My favorite tracks were No Reply, Rock and Roll Music, I'll Follow the Sun. Least favorite track was Mr. Moonlight.
Yeah, good choice.
Forgot what you were talking about.
Good choice. Alright, we're in the top 10, lads. Woo! Alright.
Sorry.
Alright, my number 10 pick is Beatles for Sale.
Oh, my number 10 pick is With the Beatles.
My number 10 pick is Beatles for Sale.
Another bit of agreement. Hey!
Let's go back to back again since you have the same pick.
Okay. Beatles for Sale. I feel like it's pretty underappreciated in the Beatles catalogue. I feel like it's really fun. It's a really fun record, in my opinion. It's filled to the brim with, fun pop rock songs that do have a somewhat bit of replay value to it, and I love a lot of the guitar work on this album in particular. I like how a lot of these tracks take on like a melancholic approach to the songwriting, and I love like a lot of these like melancholic cuts in general. And there's just some cool, genuinely fun tracks on here. Not all of it is great. It's not an overly consistent record, and some of the covers are actually pretty cool and all, but it doesn't have what would normally make a normal Beatles album enjoyable, in my opinion. I just think it's a pretty just good serviceable record, much like a lot of what the early Beatles records were. And yeah, I think it's a pretty underappreciated one, in my opinion.
Yeah, Beatles for Sale. I have the record to this. I found at a garage sale, so it actually made sense. It was like 50 cents. So
really? That's
yeah,
cool.
It was cheap. I was like,
I'm
just going to take
sign
this.
beside that said Beatles for Sale.
Yeah. No, it was like, this is like a match made in heaven. Anyway, there's a far more of a variety in the sound on this record compared to their 3 releases before. You can tell that they're still transitioning between styles and moods, as seen in like the sad, melancholic moods that you can hear on this record, as Michael said. A large fraction of it falls short, unfortunately, on here. But I think the really, really standout tracks make up for the ones that fall a little too short for me.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
So yeah, my pick was With the Beatles, and I completely agree. I even have this written down in my notes. What Trey said. This is just Please Please Me Part 2. It's, in terms of quality, it's almost indistinguishable to me. when it comes to a lot of the tracks. However, I do think that the highs on this album, are a bit more memorable, and I do come back to them more often than I would to some of the tracks on Please Please Me. And that's really the only thing alone that ranks it like above the albums it is above. Once again, the flaw, not really a flaw, I just prefer the Beatles' original works. I have nothing against the covers, it's just when I'm ranking them, I'll always pick their original tracks. Other than that, I think the performances definitely, are a lot tighter and more confident than they were on Please Please Me, in my opinion. And yeah, it's a fine album. I don't have that much to say, and anything I said about Please Please Me can pretty much be copy and pasted here.
Fair enough. Best and worst tracks. My favourites from Beatles for Sale are I'm a Loser, Babies in Black, Rock and Roll Music, and I'll Follow the Sun. My least favourite track was Hey 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 Hey.
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 My favorite tracks are definitely 8 Days a Week, Babies in Black, I'll Follow the Sun, and Every Little Thing. My least favorite is definitely Hey 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 Hey.
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 Come on. My favorites were It Won't Be Long, Please Mr. Postman, Don't Bother Me, Money, That's What I Want. My least favorites, probably Little Child. There's a weird theme.
Don't bother me.
Okay, our number 9 picks, I chose with the Beatles.
I chose A Hard Day's Night.
I chose Please Please Me. Damn.
With the Beatles shares a lot of qualities with Please Please Me. And, that record is pretty much almost indistinguishable from with the Beatles. But I feel like this one has a lot more highs and a lot more, what's the word? Replay value with a lot of these tracks. It's, similar to pretty much every early Beatles record. It's a very fun, catchy, and carefree pop rock record that, has a lot of more standout tracks for me. Instrumental-wise, again, it's pretty standard. The songwriting is still, average. But the vocals are very good on this album too, much like a lot of the Beatles records. That's all I can really say. It's just pretty much the same as Please Please Me, but I prefer more tracks.
I don't know who's going next. You can go next.
Okay. So Please Please Me is my pick for number 9. Number 9. So on their debut, Please Please Me, the Beatles utilized the sound of the 50s and 60s in more of a unique way from the rest of some of the artists that utilized this sound back then. Even though it may sound like what you think and like what it may like capture the sound of the time. Dull moments and few or far between on this one, I think. You give this like 5 listens and never find yourself becoming bored. At least that's for me. The track list is a lot more tight, a lot more concise throughout. And I think it's a lot stronger than a lot of people say.
A Hard Day's Night is the first album they released with only original tracks, and to me it almost marks the first glimpse at like the Beatles at full confidence. They don't really sound like they're trying to force anything for, commercial value. It just sounds like they're having some fun releasing tracks that they're just having fun with. It still is obviously a bit of a crowd pleaser, as a lot of the early Beatles works were. But I think that while it's not, pushing any boundaries in any way, it's a consistently fun, consistently charming record from start to finish. And I'm not really a sour twat enough to deny that it's a fun album to listen to from start to finish. It's not quite up to standards of what I ranked above it, but for what it is, it's an album I genuinely enjoy, and I will come back to quite often.
Hell yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Alright, so my favourite tracks from With the Beatles are All My Lovin', Please Mr. Postman, Roll Over Beethoven, Hold Me Tight and You Really Got a Hold on Me. And the worst tracks are Little Child and Don't Bother Me.
My favorite tracks from Please Please Me are A Taste of Honey, Misery, I Saw Her Standing There, Please Please Me, Do You Want to Know a Secret? And my least favorite, my least favorite is There's a Place.
The order you said those in.
Oh, shoot, I'm just realizing that.
Okay.
God, what album was I? A Hard Day's Night. Yeah, my favorite tracks were the self-titled, I'm Happy Just to Dance With You, Tell Me Why, and Anytime at All. Least favorite track was I'll Cry Instead.
All right. Moving on to our number 8 picks. I'm not fully sure if this is considered controversial or not, but my number 8 pick is Let It Be.
I'm just
My
kidding.
number 8 pick is Let It Be.
Oh, wow. Wow. Mine's Help.
Well, Trey needs help. He needs people to agree
Yeah,
with
do
him.
you need help?
I need to be rescued, man.
All right,
So, yeah.
All right, sorry, go
I
ahead.
guess
What were
me
you
and
gonna
Michal talk.
No, I was going to
back
say
back.
you guys go first.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll go first. All right, number 8, I chose Let It Be, the final Beatles album. It may not be the greatest final album ever, but I still think it is a really good send-off to the Beatles' legacy, and honestly, it's a good album on its own. Every song, in my opinion, is good here, but when the highs are as great as they are on here, the rest can just get lost in the tracklist. And one of the better compliments I can give to Let It Be is I just fucking love George Harrison's guitar work on this album. It is so damn good.
Yeah.
There's some just absolute jams in the track list as well. There's just so many great jammy tracks there. And, there are some great, slow burners, great grandiose tracks that seem suitable for, like, a send-off to a final album. More notably the title track, Let It Be, and a few other ones there. But other than that, I think it's a good album on its own. But I just see it as, like, a middle-of-the-road in Beatles' discography.
Yeah, it's the last album in the Beatles Core discography, and while consistently enjoyable, I also think it's, in a way, consistently underwhelming. It doesn't really have any bad tracks. All the tracks here are, I would say, good. But when you compare it to a lot of the stuff they did earlier on in their careers, it just... I can't help but think it's a bit of an underwhelming way to go out. As you said, there are certain aspects of this album that are incredible, like the guitar work. But in terms of innovation or, trying out ideas they haven't tried before, as this is their final record, it just kind of comes and goes without establishing much of an identity for itself, which is okay. It's their final album. I don't think they needed to prove a point or anything, but I do still like this album, but I would have preferred if their final album was something more like Abbey Road, perhaps. That being said, I think it's a fine album. I just can't really put it any higher.
Well said. So my album was Help. I think this record is pretty fun overall. I feel like it's more grouped with their earlier stuff, but you can see that transition into the psychedelic rock that they do down the road. They're also, I can't help but group the album and the movie together with a lot of Beatles albums. The movie with this is just so crazy. There's a whole entire story to it, and I think Help definitely goes along the title of that.
Fair enough.
Fair.
All right, my favorite tracks
yeah.
from Let It Be are Two of Us, I Mean Mine, Let It Be, I've Got a Feeling, and The Long and Winding Road. My least favorite track was Dig a Pony.
My favorite tracks were Two of Us, Let It Be, The Long and Winding Road. My least favorite was Get Back.
My favorite tracks from Help were Help, Another Girl, Ticket to Ride, and Tell Me What You See. And Yesterday. How could I forget that? My least favorite was Dizzy Miss Lizzy.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Moving on to our number 7 picks, I chose Help.
Get ready for the controversy.
Oh,
I
shit.
chose the
here we
White
go.
Album.
Oh, no!
Oh, what the heck is what?
Why? No! I am heartbroken. I'm actually heartbroken. Anyway, I chose Help.
I chose Let It Be.
Or I'll go last just to
Okay, we'll
increase the tension.
We'll get the tension going. Okay, I'll go first. Actually, Trey, do you want to go first?
You go ahead. I gotta get some notes.
Oh, okay, fair. Yeah, I chose Help anyway. This album is my favorite of the, well, early era of the Beatles. Well, I know it's often considered to be, the early era of the Beatles, but it is like a representation that the Beatles were changing up their style. I feel like this album has a lot more folky elements to it than its previous entries into their catalog. And, I like what's offered on here songwriting-wise. I think songwriting on this record increased tenfold. There are lots of great songs throughout the album, a lot of somber cuts, a lot of fun, groovy cuts. And this album contains what I believe to be, the first ever, perfect or amazing Beatles song, that being Yesterday. And, yeah, I do enjoy this album quite a lot. It is my personal favourite from the early era of the Beatles.
So my pick was Let It Be. And I think it's a great send-off. One fun fact, I don't know if it's actually fact or not, but I think they actually recorded Let It Be before Abbey Road, but the sessions of Let It Be were just so chaotic and I don't know, so everybody was so petty towards one another for being in the band for 10 years. Everybody had these pent up, anger filled explosions. So Let It Be, I think is Go ahead.
That is true. That is true, and you are right. Let It Be was recorded before Abbey Road.
All right, yeah. So, and I think the mood and the tone on Let It Be is just so it sets itself apart from a lot of the other records they had in this era as well. It feels so free flowing and free formed, and it feels like a humble ending album.
Okay,
now,
nostalgia. It's time.
I will say that I do think the White Album is, without a doubt, the most ambitious thing the Beatles have ever done, and I have the utmost respect for this album as a whole, but I just feel like, as a whole unit, it has a lot of unmemorable tracks that slow down the pace of this already very long album, and while I do still think it's an enjoyable album through and through, there's moments like Dear Prudence or Revolution 9, which just I don't really enjoy and do hinder my enjoyment for this whole album as a whole. I said whole twice. Even for a band as prolific as the Beatles, I just can't help but feel like they put too much on their plate here. There's plenty of I'll even go as far as say expertly executed ideas, but there's a number of ideas that to me come off as very forced, at times awkward, and at times just not enjoyable whatsoever. Revolution 9. And even, I will say that I still think this is an essential Beatles album. I think it's essential listening when it comes to their discography and understanding, what the Beatles were and what their art was. But when it comes to just individual albums and how much I enjoy them, which is what this is about at the end of the day, I do enjoy the next 6 albums more than the White Album.
I have to hard disagree, and I also have to hard disagree with what you said about Revolution 9.
Well, you know what? Send me an email.
Okay.
I'll get back to you. I have a busy schedule.
Alright, fair. Alright, my favorite
If anyone
track...
wants to send an email, I was going to give out my email. I'm probably not going to do that.
It's probably a good idea not to.
Look, there's
right.
there's the podcast email in the description.
Oh shit! I never put that in the description. I might as well.
Okay.
It's in the about section of the channel, I think. I didn't. Who's gonna fucking email us?
They won't.
Well, I think you're a twat. I think the Beatles' The White Album's the best one.
You're pretentious.
Pretentious.
Okay. All right.
How can you not like oblida? Back in the USSR.
Whoa.
Please shut up for a minute. I need to collect myself.
Calm down. It's okay. It's okay, Michael.
All right. My favorite songs from Help are Yesterday, Help, Act Naturally, and Ticket to Ride. My least favorite track is Tell Me What You See.
What's so funny about that?
I don't know. I don't. Why am I laughing?
Trey, you go. I don't know.
My favorite tracks from what was I talking about? Let It Be. My favorite tracks from Let It Be are Across the Universe, I Me Mine, Get Back, Let It Be, The Long Winding The Long and Winding Road. There we go. And least favorite is For You Blue.
My favorite tracks on the White Album were Back in the USSR, Obladi Oblada, Happiness is a Warm Gun, Martha My Dear, Blackbird, Your Blues, Helter Skelter. My least favorite tracks were Dear Prudence and Revolution 9. I heard a sigh. I heard a gasp.
Nothing?
Once again, my email is attached below.
Sure it is. Alright, next we have number 6 picks. My number 6 pick is Rubber Soul.
My number 6 pick is Help.
My number 6 is Rubber Soul as well.
Hey, I love how we're agreeing a lot on this, Trey.
I love it.
You gotta love it. Alright.
I'm not going to say anything.
Okay. Alright, Rubber Soul, the turning point for the Beatles' career. Their early 60s sound blends with elements of psychedelic rock, folk, and other genres. For example, a key bit of change. The first song that has a tad bit of Indian influence would be on Norwegian Wood, and I think that is a really cool aspect to the Beatles' music. Again, guitar work is amazing on this album. I pretty much enjoy every bit of guitar work on here and instrumentation as a whole, and I like pretty much every song on here. Songwriting got better as a whole on a lot of these tracks too, especially on Nowhere Man, Think for Yourself, The Word, and In My Life, and I like a lot of the messaging on some of these tracks too. And the way that I see it, this is the first properly great Beatles album. Beatles have had good albums before this, but I think this is the first one that was great, and it kind of segued into how influential and great the Beatles would become with more of their releases, which we will get to shortly. And yeah, Rubber Soul.
Rubber Soul.
Oh, wait, before I need to get I just spilled beer on my keyboard. It's a good metaphor for this podcast, really. So keep talking. And if I don't come back in time, which I will, just tell them a fact or something. Give them fun facts.
Gotcha.
Okay.
I'll try to stall. Rubber Soul. What kind of shoes you got? They're rubber. Oh wait, that's not how you spell soul. So Rubber Soul is the turning point from when they had those early rock influences started to mix with the psychedelia of the 60s. It's more of a concise track list overall, and it's a lot more memorable as well. I think. I also just want to say, the cover of this album is just so iconic.
It is so iconic.
They're just vibing there. They're just, standing maybe a little too close together. They all look really awkward. It's just so funny. I love it.
I love what's in the background, too.
Trees?
You gotta love it. If you look closely, look what kind of trees they are.
Here, I have to fucking Google.
Is that Norwegian Wood?
No.
Wait, what? Wait, what am I saying?
The famous Norwegian wood tree.
Wait, what kind of trees are those? Pine trees?
Look at the leaves.
I'm not a fucking biologist.
Just look at the leaves. What do they look like?
They look like leaves. What are you getting at? I don't get it.
What does Snoop Dogg like to do?
No way. Is that really?
I hope it is. I think it is.
Snoop Dogg's into gardening. Here, my fucking keyboard's pressing random keys right now.
Oh no. You might want to unplug your keyboard then.
It's grand.
That's a discovery. That's a discovery and a half, isn't it?
Yeah.
What album did I pick? Help. Oh wait, Trey, were you still talking?
Do you want me to keep talking? I'll keep talking.
Yeah, if you have something more to say, I'm just having an existential crisis. Help. I think Help is. I'm just saying, this is a mess.
This is literally so funny.
My keyboard keeps typing B.
Like, just unplug your keyboard or something.
No, it's wired all the way to the back of my desk. Right, Help, I think, is a seriously overlooked album. I don't think Yeah, I don't think it compares in quality to some of the releases I ranked higher, but for what it is, I mean, still very early on in their career, it's a fantastic album. I think it's a very confident album in that they started dipping their toes into different styles of music and different ideas. It's got only 2 covers as opposed to half a dozen, as a lot of the previous albums had. Those being, I think, Dizzy Miss Lizzy and Act Naturally. I may be wrong. Whatever. Every other track I think is really high quality. The Beatles instrumentally are very tight, very entertaining, very expressive. The gap between this album and the previous was a bit longer in terms of the release. I think it took a year to release this, maybe almost a year, whereas in previous albums it was only like 5 months or something like that between them. And it does kind of show this album is a lot more consistent, a lot more focused, and definitely a lot more refined to anything that came before, in my opinion. And yeah, I think it's a top-notch album. I'm fucking struggling.
All right. All right. My favorite tracks from Rubber Soul are Norwegian Wood, Nowhere Man, Michal, and In My Life. My least favorite track was What Goes On.
Pretty much the same. Girl, Michal, Norwegian Wood, In My Life, Nowhere Man, and my least favorite is What Goes On. I
love the agreement, Trey. I love the agreement.
My favorite tracks on Help were Help, Ticket to Ride, It's Only Love, I've Just Seen a Face, and of course the most covered song of all time, Yesterday. Worst tracks, I've Got to Hide Your Love Away.
Oh, that's such a good one.
It's alright.
Alright though, top 5, lads. We made it to the top 5.
Woo!
It's gonna get heated now.
I have a bit of a heated opinion as well, by the way.
Watch it be the same as mine.
I think I've less so than the White Album at 7, but...
Number 5, I chose Abbey Road.
Here. Number 5, I chose Magical Mystery Tour.
Okay, never mind. No agreement here. I chose Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band.
No! No!
Bruh. Trey, do you want to leave your email as well?
Yes, my email is 123help@mail.com.
Help, these 2 Irish guys have locked me in their Discord server. I can't get out.
Do you want me to go first? Do you want me to explain myself?
Please go first, for the love of God.
Oh God, I feel bad. Sgt. Pepper is like so good still, even though it's 5. Like they have so many good albums. Wait, why is it 5? Oh wait, no, it is 5 because it's just some of these songs really don't do it for me. Like I'll give examples in my least favorite songs, but like I feel like a lot of the things that outshine those songs don't go. I feel so bad. They don't really go the extra mile for me. They just kind of like don't go anywhere. That's not to say this isn't an amazing album. I saw one of the really cheesy cover bands of the Beatles do this perform live, like the whole thing, and I was like crying throughout the whole thing. It's still a pretty fantastic album.
Okay, I'll respect your opinion.
If it makes you feel better, we had a friend on this podcast earlier who used to do it with us, Louis. What did he rank OK Computer in his Radiohead worst to best?
5.
Didn't he put it like 5th? Yeah, so...
That's not really fun for mine either.
I mean, I also put Dark Side of the Moon at number 5 when we did Pink Floyd.
And I agree with that.
And didn't... I put Kids See Ghost at, 9 for Kanye?
Yeah, I don't forgive you for that still. I do not forgive you for that. There's more. There was more disagreement somewhere. I'm trying to remember.
We'll probably see more later down the road with our other rankings here.
Yeah, well, who's going next? You or me, Nostalgia?
I can go next. I don't mind.
Okay,
What did I say again?
What was your number 5 pick?
Oh yeah, Magical Mystery Tour. In my opinion, this definitely feels like a sort of, not even a sequel, but a follow-up to Sgt. Pepper, which isn't that surprising. They're two most, quote-unquote, psychedelic and colorful records. But that's not to take anything away from Magical Mystery Tour as an individual entity. because I think it's a brilliant album, and in my eyes, this has some of their most beautiful, most poignant songs ever, without losing any of the weirdness and psychedelia that made the Beatles, especially in their later years, such a memorable band to me. And I do love this album. Considering this is the Beatles, 5 is pretty high. Yeah, that's my take.
Fair enough. Oh yeah, I figured out what the other thing we didn't agree on was. Fucking...
Well,
it was in the Pink Floyd worst to best. I think Louis put Piper at the Gates of Dawn
Piper at the Gates of Dawn
15.
Is the worst album. He said it was the worst fucking Pink Floyd album, worse than Help.
Wow.
He said it was worse than Ummagumma.
Oh.
That's a yikes.
That's a yikes.
Alright, speaking of yikes, I'm probably going to get a lot of flack for this. I put Abbey Road at number 5. Crucify me. And keep in mind, I only listened to Abbey Road today because I rushed my listen, right? Because I completely forgot to listen to it. So, but then I listened. I did get it done, though. I did get it done. I still think it is a fantastic album. All I have to say negatively is that some of these tracks have pacing issues. Specifically, I Want You. I love the bass work on this album. The bass work is amazing. The guitars are stellar. And I love Ringo Starr's drumming on this album too. I think it's fantastic. It's some of his best, in my opinion. The songwriting is very cool for the most part, but personally, I prefer other Beatles albums for the songwriting, and I feel like this is kind of somewhat average for songwriting when it comes to the Beatles. I love both of the 4-track sequences in the track list. They're just so well made. They're so well crafted, and there's just such a journey to listen through. And generally speaking, there are no bad songs in Abbey Road. I just think it's a tad bit overrated. It may grow on me, but as of right now, I just think it's number 5.
I have a question for you guys real quick.
Yeah?
Go for it.
So do you guys have like a history with the Beatles? Like, did you grow up on them?
Yeah, I just, the only albums that I'm like pretty much unfamiliar with are the any of the older Beatle albums other than Please Please Me. I have heard Please Please Me quite a few times, but I've been listening to their older, more psychedelic stuff for years and years. I have Sgt. Pepper was like my third ever vinyl record back like 5 years ago. My dad loves the Beatles. I've always loved the Beatles.
Gotcha.
I just haven't really delved into their older stuff because the discography kind of gets confusing with all the core albums, and then the Australia only releases, the Canada only releases.
Yeah.
So I was a bit intimidated by that, but I am very familiar with the Beatles mostly.
Well, for me, I only started listening to the Beatles albums like a few months ago. Like we did one of our review episodes, and Sgt. Pepper was the classic album that came up. And I've heard Beatles songs like over the years when I was a kid and all that sort of stuff, but I only really started delving into their discography for like a month, like 2 months now. And you're basically taking my opinion as someone who's listened to every single Beatles album for the first time. So yeah.
No, that's a good perspective to have.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I always feel like that is a good perspective because like I didn't start fully getting into like reviewing music or taking music all that seriously until like 2018. And then I only started like expanding my my genre taste in when I started college. So yeah.
Yeah, because I was sitting beside him and I was like, "Yo, we should listen to like fucking Loveless."
He found I still haven't listened to Loveless.
We should listen to it in college.
We listened to like half of it and then I dipped.
Unbelievable. One does
basically,
not dip.
No, basically we found out we both liked Brockhampton, and then yeah. We just then.
Oh yeah.
Then he started introducing me to more stuff. Yeah,
gotcha.
Literally.
Cool.
And you said Ginger was your favorite Brockhampton album.
Yeah, at the time.
Oh, that changed.
Yeah.
Oh shit.
What is it? All American boy band now?
You wish. Nah, you know what?
We're talking about the Beatles.
You know what? We'll get. We'll shut up about Brockhampton. We will get to Brockhampton maybe in another episode. As of right now.
Oh yeah, of course.
As of right now, yeah, the Beatles. Yes. We're on best and worst tracks, yeah?
Several Beatles.
Yeah.
Alright, my favourite tracks from Abbey Road are Come Together, Something, Oh Darling, Octopus's Garden, and Golden Summers. My least favourite track was Her Majesty.
I don't remember what order we did them in, so you go first.
My favorite tracks from Sgt. Pepper are A Day in the Life, Within You Without You, With Little Help from My Friends, She's Leaving Home, and Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. My least favorites are Lovely Rita and When I'm 64.
My favorite tracks on Magical Mystery Tour were Magical Mystery Tour, Hello Goodbye, Strawberry Fields Forever, Penny Lane, and All You Need Is Love. Least favorite track, Fool on the Hill.
Fool on the Hill is one of my favorites. Oh damn!
Yeah, I have to pick a least favorite at this point.
I know.
Track.
I don't care. I don't care. I'm just saying. Oh, it's one of my favorites.
Bruh.
All right, top 4, lads. Moving on. My 4th pick is the White Album.
My 4 pick is Rubber Soul.
My 4 pick is Abbey Road.
All right, so number 4, the White Album. It's the longest Beatle album. It's 2 discs. At first, I just thought that this album was great. I didn't think anything else of it. But then, re-listening to it again, I genuinely think this album is amazing. I think that it is a very consistent album for how long it is. And I feel like it's one of the best double disc albums ever made. Slightly beaten out by Pink Floyd's The Wall. It's consistently good for its length. I think the guitar work on this album as a whole is amazing. I love the tones, the distortion, and of course the playing was just fantastic overall. There's some moments of brilliant songwriting too, especially on Happiness is a Warm Gun, Martha My Dear, Blackbird, and Rocky Raccoon. I especially love when grandiose horns and strings are thrown into the mix for a lot of these tracks, and I feel like this album is very ambitious for what the Beatles are trying to do. I think that it's cool that, the Beatles were kind of responsible for metal music, in a way, especially with Helter Skelter. and I still don't forgive you for not liking Revolution 9. I think Revolution 9 is like an apocalyptic soundscape of bleakness and warped realities. I listened to it in the middle of the night the other night while I was trying to get some sleep, and I was just comatose. I just think it's great, and the jammier songs on this album are great as well. I fucking love the jams on here. So yeah, that's just my take for the White Album.
Yeah, I understand why people love it. It just doesn't do much for me.
Okay, I'll respect it.
My pick was Rubber Soul. When it comes to the Beatles' whole discography and which album I would say is the best entry-level Beatles album, I would probably go for Rubber Soul. It's got, all that you would like about some of the earlier Beatles works, the catchy songwriting, the feel-good nature of some of these tracks, and on top of that, it's kind of the first album where they really delved into exploring new sounds, new ideas, and I think it's a very successful, very successful attempt at that. The songwriting on here is fantastic. The dedication, I can feel the love and dedication that went into this record. It feels very refined, very instrumentally tight, and overall I think it's a top tier Beatles record, and it definitely competes among the best ones in my opinion.
Nice. So my number 4 pick was Abbey Road. I think it's definitely a classic. It's one of the most revered and talked about albums of all time, not just in the Beatles' discography. The first side is some of the most clever original songs I've ever heard on any album. The second side does have its quips. The medley is a little one-dimensional at some points, but I feel like all of the songs on the second side go all into this one theme, and I think it's really great how the entire album progresses overall, and it ends with Golden Slumbers into Carry That Weight. I think that's one of the best transitions ever put to music. So yeah.
All right. Best and worst tracks. My favorite tracks from the White Album are Blackbird, Helter Skelter, Revolution 9, Good Night, Everybody's Got Something to Hide, Except Me and My Monkey, Birthday, and Martha My Dear. My least favourite tracks are Glass Onion and Long Long Long.
My favorite tracks on Rubber Soul were Drive My Car, Norwegian Wood, The Word, What Goes On, In My Life, Run For Your Life, and my least favorite track was Michal.
My favorite tracks on Abbey Road are You Never Give Me Your Money, Golden Slumbers Carry That Weight, Something, She Came Through the Bathroom Window, Maxwell Silverhammer. Just most of the tracks are just absolutely insane. My least favorite, though, is Polythene Pan.
All right.
Hell.
We're here. We made it to the top 3. We made it.
Pedestal.
Woo! All right. My number 3 pick, in my opinion, the most underrated Beatles album of all time, The Magical Mystery Tour.
Yes!
Wait, yours is Magical Mystery Tour as well?
No, it's higher.
No way.
My number 3 is Revolver.
My number 3 is the White Album.
Alright, so, The Magical Mystery Tour. You can definitely say in a way that this is kind of an offspring of Sgt. Pepper's. It's basically Sgt. Pepper's if it goes on a really trippy LSD binge, right? It pretty much has...
Even more so.
Even more so. I love the zaniness, the off-the-wall nature of this album. I love the use of different kinds of psychedelic effects used, like vocal pitching, warped sampling. And there's some really weird songwriting, especially on I Am the Walrus, which makes little to no sense at all. And it was made to be that way. I love how bright and like zany and colourful this album is. I think there's genuinely some outstanding tracks that deserve to be held at a pedestal as some of the best in the Beatles' discography. Especially like The Fool on the Hill. I think that is such an underrated track. The psychedelic tracks are by far some of my favourites on the album. Blue AJ, Strawberry Field, and you know, Forever and Flying. They're all amazing tracks. I think I'm glad that this was like made an album and not just an EP, because in all honesty, I think it's amazing. I genuinely love this album, and yeah, that's all I gotta say.
Yeah, I love Revolver. I think it was definitely a turning point in the Beatles' career in my eyes. Up until this point, their sound was to an extent very safe. It was basic enough, like Mersey beat / rock and roll / folk rock. But I think Revolver was the first time the group really focused in on experimenting with their sound, like fully. Not as much as they did on later releases, but I think still a lot in comparison to some of the albums that came before it. And I do think that this more measured approach to experimenting and expanding their sound makes this a record that's way easier to digest than the likes of Sgt. Pepper's and certainly the White Album. And I think this approach really pays off. No matter what you like about the Beatles, it's guaranteed to be on Revolver. There's some gritty rock tunes, there's some emotional ballads, there's cool orchestral like aspects to the music, there's experimental aspects, and overall it's a very rewarding and satisfying album to commit your time to listening. And while it's not my favourite Beatles album, that's by no means its fault. I think it's an excellent album. I just connect a bit more with some of the albums I ranked higher.
Nice. So, my number 3 pick was the White Album, self-titled. There's so many options on this thing, so little time. The album really packs a punch as a whole. As Nostalgia said, I think it's one of the most groundbreaking and one of the most, what's the word? What did you say? You said, whatever. It's daring. It's daring. Yeah. That's what I was trying to say. They just decided to put 30 tracks on one album and said, hey, we're not going to give this a title. This is the Beatles. This is our sound as of right now, where we are in our lives, and this is a caricature of who we are. It's just the best conglomeration of many different tracks from any band. Like, seriously, pretty much anything on this album has a different style, and that's the appeal. It's just a beautiful mess of an album, and I love everything on it. Almost everything.
Yes.
That.
All right.
Here, don't get too excited.
Okay.
We're only on number 3.
Okay. All right. All right. Best tracks on Magical Mystery Tour are "The Fool on the Hill," "Hello Goodbye," "Strawberry Fields Forever," and "Penny Lane." My least favorite track is "Baby You're a Rich Man."
My favorite tracks on Revolver were Taxman, Eleanor Rigby, Love You Too, Yellow Submarine, and For No One Else, my least favorite track was Dr. Robert.
My favorite tracks on the Beatles White Album, I don't really want to go down the track list, just read the whole thing, but I'll mention some of my favorites like Helter Skelter, Happiness is a Warm Gun, Sexy Sadie, Good Night, While My Guitar Gently Weeps is stellar, and my least favorite, the only song I don't like is Birthday.
Fair enough. Top two, the final two from each of our opinions. And I had a tough time choosing between these two particular albums because I think they are like the pinnacle of the Beatles. And, you know, they're some of my favourite albums. So, number two, I chose Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band.
Number two, I chose Abbey Road.
Number two, I chose Magical Mystery Tour.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Alright, Sgt. Pepper's, the first Beatles album that I've ever listened to, courtesy of this podcast. And I think after we recorded the May recap podcast, I went for a walk and listened to Sgt. Pepper's, and the more I listened to it, the more I fell in love with this record. I think it's one of the band's most enjoyable and well-known albums for a reason. It's a psychedelic journey that contains some of my favourite Beatles songs. You know, instrumental-wise, this album sounds absolutely amazing. You know, there's moments of uplifting songs that never fail to make me smile, especially with a little help from my friends. When I was just walking down the street, I was just so giddy. I was just listening to it just with a big fat fucking smile on my face. And just people were driving past me like, what the fuck is he so happy about? And, in all honesty, and When I'm 64 is a really good track. I love that too. It just makes me happy. And the psychedelic sound of this record is just so entrancing to me, especially Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. That track grew on me so much. And, you know, like we said when we reviewed it, you know, it's not about what John Lennon said it was. It's about fucking LSD. There's no doubt about it. And, you know, there's moments on this album that just have great songwriting, like She's Leaving Home, When I'm 64, and A Day in the Life. I think they're some of the best Beatles tracks ever written. I love the incorporations of different types of instrumentation on this album too, especially orchestral strings, harps, you know, Indian music, and, you know, it's just a whole journey, and I would recommend anyone who's listening, please take that journey. It's that great, in my opinion.
Abbey Road, it's quite hard to believe that this is the last album the Beatles ever recorded because of how fresh and memorable this album is from front to back. There's very little on this album in terms of tracks that aren't, you know, memorable, interesting, gratifying. It's just got one iconic track after another, and it has some of my favorite Beatles songs of all time, like I Want You and Here Comes the Sun. And it's just such a fun album. It shows a lot of confidence and swagger, but it never feels like it's taking itself too seriously, like the Beatles have at times. It's just, you know, it's an incredible record. It's a record that only a certain band would be able to come out with, and the Beatles did it. And, you know, it's so iconic for a reason, especially with that cover. Yeah, it's amazing.
Awesome.
If a certain album didn't exist, this would definitely be number one.
Sorry for interrupting. As you were saying that, I was just looking up at my wall at the Abbey Road poster, and I was just... I agree with a lot of what you said. So, my second pick was Magical Mystery Tour, and I've always maybe wanted to dabble in psychedelics, and if I ever did, I probably wouldn't because I'm a pussy. If I ever did, this is what I would want playing in the background. It's just, this album's sheer zaniness brings it to it's my second favorite from them. Through different stories of crazy proportions on this thing, there's really not a great song on here. I think they're all greater than amazing, and they just, I don't know, I hate to be dramatic, but all of the songs just transcend the Beatles, and, like, they're all instant classics to me.
That's fair enough.
I agree.
And I hard agree.
Nice.
My favorite tracks from Sgt. Pepper's was, with a little help from my friends, the best Ringo song, might I add, She's Leaving Home, and Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. My least favorite track is Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite.
Ooh. My favorite tracks on Abbey Road were Come Together, Something, Octopus's Garden, Here Comes the Sun, Carry That Weight, and my second favorite Beatles track, I Want You, She's So Heavy. And my least favorite track is Because.
Oh, wow. My favorite tracks on Magical Mystery Tour, the whole thing, Penny Lane, Strawberry Fields Forever, and Fool on the Hill, I'm a Walrus. I am the Walrus. I could never live without any of these tracks. And so, for that reason, I really don't have a least favorite.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's fair, too. That is number one picks, lads. It's simple. My favorite Beatles album is Revolver.
Yeah. Mine too.
Sgt. Pepper's. You two go first, then I'll finish it off.
Okay, Revolver. Perfect. It's literally perfect to me. The way I see it, this album is the perfect album that represented the Beatles. It basically has everything that the Beatles were doing in their whole careers culminated into one, in a way. I love every track on here. Hell, I even like Yellow Submarine. It was one of the first Beatles albums that I ever knew, and I still really enjoy it to this day. You know, I love the blends of like psychedelic music, you know, pop rock, you know, incorporations of different sounds into their music. I like the warped sampling. I love the Indian influence on one of the tracks in the album, and overall, I just love the songwriting on this album too. Eleanor Rigby is my favorite Beatles song of all time, and I just love how melancholic, like, orchestral, and just how sad that song is. And it makes you think, you know. And I do enjoy a lot of the uplifting songs on here too, especially like Good Day Sunshine. It's just really a happy, upbeat song. And, you know, the distorted guitar work on this album is stellar, especially on Your Bird Can Sing and She Said, She Said. And, you know, the bass playing as well just grew on me heavy, especially on like tracks like For No One and Dr. Robert. I really want to get Revolver on vinyl now because of how much I do really enjoy it. And, you know, overall, I think it is the best Beatles album.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with you on that. I was reading up on the album a while ago and how it was made, and one night they were at somebody's house, all four of them, with their girlfriends and wives. And the guy's house that they were at, they all roofied their coffee. He roofied the guy. I mean, the house that they were at, the guy who lived there roofied their coffee with psychedelics, and they went for a night on the town, and that's how Revolver basically was born. It opened up this whole world to them of psychedelics and psychedelic music, and not just the rock and roll that they were doing before this. It's really hard to justify words for some of the best classic rock material of all time. Really, it's really hard to put to words. The record depicts each of their separate mental states in a totally unique and versatile way. And flowing from many different emotions, the album really mixes their early influence with what was to come in their career. And for that reason, it's the most concise and well-written album in their discography, and just one of the best of all time, in my opinion.
Respect that. Yeah, speaking of one of my favorite albums of all time, Sgt. Pepper's, it really was one of the first albums that, even aside from the Beatles discography, that really kind of put me onto... It's one of the few albums that I listened to like when I was, I don't know, like 13, 14, that really expanded my horizons when it comes to music. Like, there was Sgt. Pepper's, Loveless, Death Consciousness, Selected Ambient Works, stuff like that, and this was definitely always there with me. There's just so much I love about this album, and every time I listen to it, something connects with me. It has this atmosphere and aura surrounding it that's unlike anything else I've ever heard from these guys or anyone else. It's got so much variety, yet everything comes together perfectly. There's not a single dull moment or a single track that doesn't fit in. There's the uneasy psychedelic aspects of tracks like Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds or Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite that are just really mesmerizing. They paint really vivid imagery, unlike anything else I've ever heard from even the Beatles. And then there's tracks like When I'm 64 or She's Leaving Home that at first seem quite simple, but they're so poignant and so emotive in their simplicity that it blows me away so many times anytime I listen to this. And there's also really fun tracks like Lovely Rita, I think, is one of the most underrated Beatles tracks. With a Little Help from My Friends is great. And this album genuinely just feels like a journey from start to finish, and it's a journey that I take time and time again, and I probably will never get tired of. And I did kind of entertain the thought of maybe putting Abbey Road at number 1, but it just wouldn't have been right for me. This album just means too much to me. Yeah, that's all I have to say.
Nice.
And that's fair. That is fair. Alright, my favourite tracks from Revolver are Eleanor Rigby, Good Day Sunshine, and For No One. If I had to pick a least favourite... Shit, I don't want to pick a least favourite, but if I had to, I'd probably say Dr. Robert.
I don't even want to pick favorite tracks. The whole thing. I'll just say the whole thing. My favorite. At least favorite, none of it. Nowhere near it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we'll respect it.
Favorite tracks, none of them. Oh wait, all of them. Least favorite.
You put
hate
me out
this
My
album.
opinion changed drastically in the matter of 2 minutes.
You don't like every single song on that track. Wow.
Yeah,
you put
no,
it
I
on that
changed my
track.
mind.
Actually, I changed my mind. It's the worst Beatles album.
I hate the Beatles. Where are we even talking about?
I will say that A Day in a Life is my favorite Beatles song.
Alright, that's a good song. That's a very good song.
Good pick. Good pick.
So that's it. We did it. We
Well,
ranked all
wow,
the Beatles
What a
albums.
journey.
But, oh yeah, before I
We
forgot...
ranked the Beatles album.
I
I broke my keyboard.
I left uncontrollably at something that wasn't really that funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a win-win.
Nice, wholesome moment.
I completely forgot to ask at the beginning of the podcast before we start, how do we rank the Beatles members?
Oh, wait, that's easy. I was like, that's hard, and it's like not hard. Who wants to
Alright,
go
how
first?
about this? I'll go first.
I mean, it depends on if we're ranking them ability-wise or personality-wise.
I'm ranking them just based off of my personal preference. Alright, number 4, Ringo. 3, John. 2, Paul. And George, best.
Ditto.
Yeah, are we all in agreement on this?
We're all in agreement
think
with the
so.
Beatles members. No fucking way.
But if it was personality-wise, Ringo fucking number 1.
Ringo
Oh,
would
yeah.
be number 1. Ringo is such a lovable man.
Peace and love.
Peace and love.
Peace and love, everyone.
Do not send me fan mail.
I don't have time for it.
It's so good. Alright, so... Yeah, Trey, thanks for coming on, man. We really appreciate
Thank
you
you,
coming
man.
on.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. It's been fun. Hopefully,
You can feel
I just
free to
muted.
come...
I just muted myself.
Oh.
I just want to say thank you guys for having me. It's been really fun. I just want to talk with you guys a lot more about music because you guys are really fun guys.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah. You could definitely
Yeah.
come on for another episode someday. Hell, maybe when Brockhampton release their albums, we could do a Brockhampton Worst to Best.
Oh, I'd love to.
That'd be great.
Yeah, man. You're welcome on anytime.
Awesome, guys.
You're,
Thank you.
You're a friend of the podcast. You can come on whenever
End
you
of the
please.
podcast officially.
Awesome.
Hey.
Great.
We don't pay, sorry.
It's okay.
We pay you in clout, even though you have more clout than us.
Yeah.
Don't know about that, but you guys are awesome. Thank you guys for having me here.
And thanks for coming
No
on
worries,
too.
man.
Thank you
for coming
guys.
on.
Thank you guys so much for checking out today's episode of the Tape Podcast. Who do you agree with most on our rankings for the Beatles? And
It won't be me.
and how do you rank the Beatles' discography? Let us know in the comments below. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Check out our links to our album of the years, rate your music, and of course check out our own individual channels as well. And check out Trey's stuff as well. He posts some pretty good content and he makes really good
For
reviews.
the 2 people that know us and don't know him.
Yeah, so overall, yeah, we'll see you guys.
Bye.
Bye, guys.